Hey guys, welcome back to our take on classic tales in a cyberpunk style. This video is part 2 of our reimagining of the classic strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in a cyberpunk setting. If you want to see part 1, the link is in the description of this video. Now, let's go back to the story. Chapter 3. The Fatal Exception. Nearly a year later, in the month of October, Neo-London was startled by a crime of singular ferocity, rendered all the more notable by the high position of the victim. The details were few and startling, captured in 4K resolution by a passive surveillance drone. A young woman, a freelance data miner living alone in a micro-apartment overlooking the river sector, had positioned herself by the window to watch the city's holographic moon cycle. The air was clearer than usual, the acid rain having scrubbed the smog from the upper levels, and the lane below was lit by the soft, humming glow of sodium vapor lamps. It was roughly 11 o'clock when she noticed an elderly gentleman of distinguished appearance walking towards the bridge. He carried a secure data slate and moved with the analog grace of the pre-war generation. It was Sir Danvers Carew, a high-ranking member of the Bioethics Parliament. Advancing to meet him came another man, very small and plainly dressed. The witness recognized him instantly and felt a surge of nausea ripple through her neural implant. It was Mr. Hyde, who had once visited her sector for illicit supplies. Sir Danvers stopped and accosted the smaller man with a polite, old-world courtesy, perhaps asking his way. The moon shone on his face as he spoke. The witness described it as breathing an innocent and old-world kindness, yet with a certain high-resolution clarity of purpose. Suddenly, and without any warning from the threat detection algorithms, Mr. Hyde broke out in a flame of anger. He stamped his foot, brandishing a heavy walking stick, a rare, kinetic impact weapon made of reinforced carbon fiber and ironwood. He carried on, as the witness described, like a madman whose operating system had suffered a catastrophic error. The old gentleman took a step back, with the air of one very much surprised and a trifle hurt. And at that, Mr. Hyde broke all bounds and clubbed him to the earth. What followed was not a fight, but a deconstruction. With ape-like fury, he trampled his victim underfoot and hailed down a storm of blows, under which the bones were audibly shattered and the body jumped upon the roadway. The violence was so fast, so mechanically precise, yet chaotic, that it looked like a glitch in the video feed, a blur of motion that the frame rate could not capture. The witness, overcome by the sheer sensory overload of the brutality, fainted, her internal monitors triggering an emergency shutdown. It was 2 o'clock when she came to herself and called the private security forces. The murderer was gone long ago, but there lay his victim in the middle of the lane, incredibly mangled. The stick with which the deed had been done, although it was of some rare and very tough composite material, had broken in the middle under the stress of this insensate cruelty. One splintered half had rolled in the neighboring gutter. The other, without doubt, had been carried away by the murderer. A secure wallet and the data slate were found upon the victim. The wallet contained credit chips of immense value, but the slate contained no data, only a sealed physical envelope addressed, in case of death, to the name of Gabriel Utterson. This was brought to the lawyer the next morning, before he was out of bed, and he had no sooner seen it and been told the circumstances than he shot out a solemn lip. "I shall say nothing till I have seen the body," said he. "This may be very serious. Have the kindness to wait while I boot up." He hurried over his breakfast and drove with the security officer to the nearest precinct station, where the body had been carried. As soon as he came into the cell, he nodded. "Yes," said he, "I recognize him. I am sorry to say that this is Sir Danvers Carew." "Good God, sir," exclaimed the officer, "is it possible?" And the next moment his eye lighted up with professional ambition. "This will make a great deal of noise in the media feeds," he said, "and perhaps you can help us to the man." And he briefly narrated what the data miner had seen and showed the broken stick. Mr. Utterson had already quailed at the name of Hyde, but when the stick was laid before him, he could doubt no longer. Broken and battered as it was, he recognized it for one that he had himself presented many years before to Henry Jekyll. "Is this Mr. Hyde a person of small stature?" he inquired. Particularly small and particularly wicked-looking is what the witness called him, said the officer. If you will come with me in my vehicle, said Utterson, I think I can take you to his server node. I mean his house. It was by this time about 9 in the morning, and the first fog of the season, a chocolate-colored pall of industrial exhaust, hung low upon the heavens. As the cab crawled from street to street, Mr. Utterson beheld a marvelous number of degrees and hues of twilight. For here, it would be dark like the back end of evening, and there would be a glow of a rich, lurid brown, like the light of some strange conflagration. And here, for a moment, the fog would be quite broken up, and a haggard shaft of daylight would glance in between the swirling wreaths. The dismal quarter of Soho, now a quarantine zone for failed augmentations and illicit tech, seen under these changing glimpses, with its muddy streets and its slatternly passengers and its lamps, which had never been extinguished or had been kindled afresh to combat this mournful reinvasion of darkness, seemed, in a lawyer's eyes, like a district of some city in a nightmare. They stopped before the address. It was the home of Henry Jekyll's favorite, the man who was heir to 250,000 credits. An ivory-faced and silvery-haired old woman opened the door. She had an evil face, smoothed by hypocrisy and cheap cosmetic surgery, but her manners were excellent. Yes, she said, this was Mr. Hyde's luxury unit, but he was not at home. He had been in that night very late, but had gone away again in less than an hour. There was nothing strange in that. His habits were very irregular, and he was often absent. For instance, it was nearly 2 months since she had seen him till yesterday. Very well. Then, we wish to see his rooms, said the lawyer. And when the woman began to declare it was impossible, I had better tell you who this person is, he added. This is Inspector Newcomen of the Corp SEC. A flash of odious joy appeared upon the woman's face. Ah, said she, he is in trouble. What has he done? Mr. Utterson and the inspector exchanged glances. He does not seem a very popular character, observed the latter. And now, my good woman, just let me and this gentleman have a look about us. In the whole extent of the house, which but for the old woman remained otherwise empty, Mr. Hyde had only used a couple of rooms, but these were furnished with luxury and good taste. A closet was filled with wine. The picture of a bioengineered nude hung on the wall, a gift, as Utterson supposed, from Henry Jekyll, who was much of a connoisseur, and the carpets were of many plies and agreeable in color. At this moment, however, the rooms bore every mark of having been recently and hurriedly ransacked. Clothes lay about the floor, with their pockets inside out. Locked drawers stood open, and on the hearth there lay a pile of gray ashes, as though many papers had been burned. From these embers the inspector disinterred the butt end of a green check book, which had resisted the action of the fire. The other half of the stick was found behind the door, and as this clinched his suspicions, the officer declared himself delighted. A visit to the bank, where several thousand credits were lying to the murderer's credit, completed his gratification. You may depend upon it, sir, he told Mr. Utterson. I have him in my hand. He must have lost his head, or he never would have left the stick or, above all, burned the checkbook. Why, money's life to the man. We have nothing to do but wait for him at the bank and get out the wanted holographic posters. This, however, was not so easy to accomplish, for Mr. Hyde had few familiars. Even the master of the servant maid had only seen him twice. His family could nowhere be traced. He had never been photographed, and the few who could describe him differed widely, as common observers will. Only on one point were they agreed, and that was the haunting sense of unexpressed deformity, the feeling that the man was a corrupted file, incompatible with the rest of the human system, with which the fugitive impressed his beholders. If you've been following the story this far, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video to help me spread this new way of telling stories. Now, let's go back to the story. Chapter 4. The Incident of the Encryption. It was late in the afternoon when Mr. Utterson found his way to Dr. Jekyll's door. He was admitted by Poole and led down through the kitchen and across a yard which had once been a garden, but was now paved with cooling vents and server exhaust ports, to the building which was indifferently known as the laboratory or the dissecting rooms. The doctor had bought the house from the heirs of a celebrated cybersurgeon, and his own tastes being chemical rather than anatomical, he had changed the destination of the block at the bottom of the garden. It was the first time that the lawyer had been received in that part of his friend's quarters, and he eyed the dingy, windowless structure with curiosity and gazed round with a distasteful sense of strangeness as he crossed the theater, once crowded with eager students and now lying gaunt and silent, the tables laden with chemical apparatus, the floor strewn with crates of fiber-optic cabling and litter of packing straw, and the light falling dimly through the foggy cupola. At the further end, a flight of stairs mounted to a door covered with red baize, and through this, Mr. Utterson was at last received into the doctor's private cabinet. It was a large room, fitted round with glass presses, furnished, among other things, with a cheval glass and a business table, and looking out upon the court by 3 dusty windows barred with iron. The fire burned in the grate. A lamp was set lighted on the chimney shelf, for even in the houses the fog began to lie thickly. And there, close up to the warmth, sat Dr. Jekyll, looking deathly sick. He did not rise to meet his visitor, but held out a cold hand and bade him welcome in a changed voice. "And now," said Mr. Utterson, as soon as Poole had left them, "you have heard the news?" The doctor shuddered. "They were crying it in the square," he said. "I heard them in my dining room." "One word," said the lawyer. "Carew is my client, but so are you, and I want to know what I am doing. You have not been mad enough to hide this fellow." "Utterson, I swear to God," cried the doctor, "I swear to God I will never set eyes on him again. I bind my honor to you that I am done with him in this world. It is all an end. And indeed he does not want my help. You do not know him as I do. He is safe. He is quite safe. Mark my words, he will never more be heard of." The lawyer listened gloomily. He did not like his friend's feverish manner. "You seem pretty sure of him," said he. "And for your sake, I hope you may be right. If it came to a trial, your name might appear." "I am quite sure of him," replied Jekyll. "I have ground for certainty that I cannot share with anyone. But there is one thing on which you may advise me. I have received a letter, and I am at a loss whether I should show it to the police. I should like to leave it in your hands, Utterson. You would judge wisely, I am sure. I have so great a trust in you. You fear, I suppose, that it might lead to his detection?" "No," said the other. "I cannot say that I care what becomes of Hyde. I am quite done with him. I was thinking of my own character, which this hateful business has rather exposed." Utterson ruminated a while. He was surprised at his friend's selfishness, and yet relieved by it. "Well," said he at last, "let me see the letter." The letter was written in an odd, upright hand and signed Edward Hyde, and it signified, briefly enough, that the writer's benefactor, Dr. Jekyll, whom he had long so unworthily repaid for 1,000 generosities, need labor under no alarm for his safety, as he had means of escape on which he placed a sure dependence. "Have you the envelope?" asked Utterson. "I burned it," replied Jekyll, "before I thought what I was about. But it bore no postmark." The note was handed in. "Shall I keep this and sleep upon it?" asked Utterson. "I wish you to judge for me entirely," was the reply. "I have lost confidence in myself." "Well, I shall consider," returned the lawyer. "And now one word more. It was Hyde who dictated the terms in your will about that disappearance?" The doctor seemed seized with a qualm of faintness. He shut his mouth tight and nodded. "I knew it," said Utterson. "He meant to murder you. You have had a fine escape." "I have had what is far more to the purpose," returned the doctor solemnly. "I have had a lesson. Oh God, Utterson, what a lesson I have had!" And he covered his face for a moment with his hands. On his way out, the lawyer stopped and had a word or two with Poole. "By the by," said he, "there was a letter handed in today. What was the messenger like?" But Poole was positive nothing had come except by post, and only circulars by that, he added. This news sent off the visitor with his fears renewed. Plainly the letter had come by the laboratory door. Possibly, indeed, it had been written in the cabinet, and if that were so, it must be differently judged and handled with more caution. The analysis. On his way home, Utterson stopped at his office to consult with his head clerk, Mr. Guest. Guest was a man of intense curiosity and a specialist in forensic coding and digital handwriting analysis. There was no man from whom Utterson kept fewer secrets. Guest, said he, laying the tablet with the digital letter before him. This is a sad business about Sir Danvers. Yes, sir, indeed. It has elicited a great deal of public feeling, said Guest. The man, of course, was mad. I should like to hear your views on that, replied Utterson. I have a document here in his hand. It is between ourselves, for I scarce know what to do about it. It is an ugly business at the best. But there it is, quite in your way, a murderer's autograph. Guest's eyes brightened, and he sat down at once and studied the code structure on the screen. No, sir, he said, not mad, but it is an odd hand, and by all accounts, a very odd writer, added the lawyer. Just then the servant entered with a note. Is that from Dr. Jekyll, sir? Inquired the clerk. I thought I knew the encryption header. Anything private, Mr. Utterson? Only an invitation to dinner. Why? Do you want to see it? One moment. I thank you, sir. The clerk laid the two digital files side by side on his monitor, running a comparison algorithm. His face was a study of concentration. Thank you, sir, he said at last, returning both files. It is a very interesting autograph. There can be no two opinions about that, said Utterson. Why? The code syntax is in many points identical, only differently compiled, said Guest. It is a rather singular resemblance. The variables are declared in the exact same manner, but the logic flow is inverted. Rather quaint, said Utterson. It is, as you say, rather quaint, returned Guest. I wouldn't speak of this note, you know, said the master. No, sir, said the clerk. I understand. But no sooner was Mr. Utterson alone that night than he locked the note into his safe, where it reposed from that time forward. What, he thought, Henry Jekyll forged for a murderer, and his blood ran cold in his veins. Chapter 5: The Incident of Dr. Lanyon. Time ran on. Thousands of credits were offered in reward, for the death of Sir Danvers was felt as a public blow to the stability of Neo-London. But Mr. Hyde had disappeared from the grid as if he had never existed. No digital footprint, no biometric trail. He had simply logged off. For 2 months, Dr. Jekyll was much of his old self. He came out of his seclusion, renewed relations with his friends, and became once more their familiar guest and entertainer in the high society corporate circles. His face seemed to open and brighten, as if with an inward consciousness of service. And for more than 2 months, the doctor was at peace. But on the 8th of January, Utterson dined with him, and on the 12th, and again on the 14th, the door was shut against the lawyer. The doctor is confined, said Poole through the intercom. Express orders. Personal quarantine protocol. On the 15th, Utterson tried to see Dr. Lanyon. There at least he was not denied admittance. But when he came in, he was shocked at the change which had taken place in the doctor's appearance. Lanyon had his death warrant written legibly upon his face. The rosy, healthy man had grown pale and flabby. His flesh seemed to have fallen away. He was visibly balder and older. But it was the look in his eye that terrified Utterson, a look of deep, unshakable terror, like that of a man who has seen the exposed core of a reactor. I have had a shock, said Lanyon, with a weak voice. I have had a systemic shock. My neurotransmitters will never recover. It is a question of weeks. Well, life has been pleasant. I liked it. Yes, sir, I used to like it. I sometimes think if we knew all, we should be more glad to disconnect. Jekyll is ill, too, observed Utterson. Have you seen him? Lanyon's face changed, and he held up a trembling hand, covered in medical monitoring electrodes. I wish to see or hear no more of Dr. Jekyll, he said in a loud, unsteady voice. I am quite done with that person, and I beg that you will spare me any allusion to one whom I regard as dead. We are 3 very old friends, Lanyon, said Utterson. We shall not live to make others. Nothing can change what I have seen, whispered Lanyon. There are things, Utterson, violations of nature that science was not meant to hack. Some day, after I am dead, you may perhaps come to learn the right and wrong of this. I cannot tell you. Lanyon kept his word. In less than a fortnight, his systems failed, and he died. The night after the funeral, at which he had been sadly affected, Utterson locked the door of his business room, and sitting there by the light of a melancholy halogen lamp, drew out a certified data packet addressed by the hand and sealed with the encryption key of his dead friend. Confidential, to be opened only by J.G. Utterson in case of the death of Henry Jekyll. Utterson broke the seal. Within there was another enclosure, likewise marked, not to be opened till the death or disappearance of Dr. Henry Jekyll. Utterson revolved the packet in his hand. Curiosity was a virus, trying to bypass his professional ethics. But he resisted. He stored the packet in the deepest sector of his private safe. The narrative of Dr. Lanyon, the decrypted log. The following is the content of the letter Utterson would eventually read. On the 9th of January, I received a digital missive from my old-school companion, Henry Jekyll. It requested, with a desperation that bordered on madness, that I drive to his house, force the door of his cabinet, and retrieve a specific drawer containing certain chemical agents and a notebook. I was to take this drawer to my own consulting room and wait until midnight for a messenger. I did as requested. The drawer contained powders, a phial of blood-red liquid that fumed with a volatile ether, and a book of data logs recording a series of failed experiments. Dates and brief remarks like glitch detected or total failure were annotated next to them. At midnight, the messenger arrived. He was a small man, dressed in clothes that were too large for him, giving him the appearance of a scavenged android. As he entered, I was struck, as others have been, by a peculiar sensation of disgust. It was not merely his appearance, but a physical effect, a disruption of my own pulse, a feeling of incipient rigor, as if my biological systems were rejecting his proximity. "Have you got it?" he cried, his voice vibrating with a hunger that was almost withdrawal. "Have you got the drawer?" I pointed to it. He sprang to it, and then paused, and laid his hand upon his heart. I could hear his teeth grate with the convulsive action of his jaw, and his face was so ghastly to see that I grew alarmed for his life and reason. "Compose yourself," said I. He turned a dreadful smile to me, and as if with the decision of despair, plucked away the sheet of the drawer and unlocked the phial. He mixed the red liquid with a white powder. The mixture began to hiss and smoke. The color changed from red to a dark purple, and then, slowly, to a watery green. It looked like radioactive waste. "And now," said he, "to settle what remains. Will you be wise? Will you be guided? Will you suffer me to take this glass in my hand and go forth from your house without further parley? Or has the greed of curiosity too much command of you? Think before you answer, for it shall be done as you decide. As you decide, you shall be left as you were before, and neither richer nor wiser, unless the sense of service to a man in distress may be counted as a kind of riches of the soul. Or, if you shall so prefer to choose, a new province of knowledge and new avenues to fame and power shall be laid open to you, here, in this room, upon the instant, and your sight shall be blasted by a prodigy to stagger the unbelief of Satan." "Sir," said I, affecting a coolness that I was far from possessing, "you speak in riddles, and you will perhaps not wonder that I hear you with no very strong impression of belief. But I have gone too far in the way of inexplicable services to pause before I see the end." "It is well," replied the visitor. "Lanyon, you remember your vows. What follows is under the seal of our profession." He put the glass to his lips and drank at one gulp. A cry followed. He reeled, staggered, clutched at the table and held on, staring with injected eyes, gasping with open mouth. And as I looked there came, I thought, a change. He seemed to swell. His face became black, and the features seemed to melt and alter. And the next moment I had sprung to my feet and leaped back against the wall, my arm raised to shield me from that prodigy, my mind submerged in terror. "Oh, God!" I screamed, and "Oh, God!" again and again. For there before my eyes, pale and shaken, and half fainting and groping before him with his hands, like a man restored from death, there stood Henry Jekyll. What he told me in the next hour, I cannot bring my mind to set on paper. I saw what I saw, I heard what I heard, and my soul sickened at it. And yet now, when that sight has faded from my eyes, I ask myself if I believe it, and I cannot answer. My life is shaken to its roots. Sleep has left me. The deadliest terror sits by me at all hours of the day and night. I feel that my days are numbered, and that I must die, and yet I shall die incredulous. As for the moral turpitude that man unveiled to me, even with tears of penitence, I cannot, even in memory, dwell on it without a start of horror. I will say but one thing, utter son, and that, if you can bring your mind to credit it, will be sufficient. The creature who crept into my house that night was, on Jekyll's own confession, known by the name of Hyde and hunted for in every corner of the land as the murderer of Carew. The second part of this story ends here. Thanks for watching. See you next time.